morning and welcome to Rising. We have a wonderful show for you today, this morning, following the State of the Union, which I'm sure everyone stayed up watching. I'm sure we're going to get your reaction to it,
Oh, yeah.
Briahna.
I have lots of thoughts and feelings coming up in my radar. But first, let's take on the highlights. President Biden delivered his second State of the Union, of course, last night, where he spent a good portion of the night sparring with some rather unruly Republicans.
All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you. And I tell you, I enjoy conversion.
Well, Biden spent much of the speech championing achievements of his administration thus far. Notably, the president also leaned into Americans' economic dissatisfaction, delivering a populist message on the tax code.
The tax system is not fair. It is not fair. Look, the idea that in 2020, 55 of the largest corporations in America, the Fortune 500, made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal taxes? Zero? Folks, it's simply not fair. We have to reward work, not just wealth. Pass my proposal for the billionaire minimum tax. You know, there's 1,000 billionaires in America. It's up from about 600 in the beginning of the term. But no billionaire should be paying a lower tax rate than a school teacher or firefighter. I mean it. Think about it.
The opposition party, of course, found plenty to dislike about the president's speech. Here's Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
And while you reap the consequences of their failures, the Biden administration seems more interested in woke fantasies than the hard reality Americans face every day. Most Americans simply want to live their lives in freedom and peace. But we are under attack in a left-wing culture war we didn't start and never wanted to fight. Every day we are told we must partake in their rituals, salute their flags, and worship their false idols. All while big government colludes with big tech to strip away the most American thing there is, your freedom of speech. That's not normal. It's crazy, and it's wrong. President Biden is unwilling to defend our border, defend our skies, and defend our people. He is simply unfit to serve as commander-in-chief.
So I think this is very interesting. I agree with some of those criticisms that Sarah Huckabee Sanders laid out. I've been very vocal about the assaults on the First Amendment vis-a-vis government federal pressure to social media companies and others with respect to COVID and other matters. But the interesting thing is she was responding to a speech that he didn't give. Joe Biden did not give wokeness one iota of attention. He didn't promise to install a drag queen in every school in America. He didn't talk about doing all those things. So the difficulty for Republicans, if they want to run against critical race theory and DEI and transgender activism and all of those things, Joe Biden is just a really bad foil for that approach because I don't think he convincingly seems interested in those things. He didn't talk about them at all. And that's, he talked about economic themes. In fact, he talked about themes that the Trumpian Republicans love.
Right. And in fact, he talked about big tech and wanting to break them up using antitrust law. She paints him as someone who was actually sympathetic to that. Whatever, and this is when I get into my radar, whether or not you can believe what Biden was talking about is a whole other issue. But in terms of what came out of his mouth, again, you're right. She did not respond to a speech that he actually gave. And to be honest, I like drag queens, but the only drag queen that was actually in that room was put there by the Republican Party, and his name is George Santos. So the idea that they're making this all a big hubbub about wokeness, I mean, she seems incredibly out of touch. She seems like she is not substantive and that her party is representing a whole host of unsubstantive issues. And frankly, that exchange that Biden had about Social Security and Medicare, when he got all of those boos and heckles from the crowd. Not only did that undermine what Kevin McCarthy had said about how we're going to behave much more respectably and sensibly than what Nancy Pelosi did, ripping up the speech and doing the petty clapping and stuff behind Donald Trump. Obviously, that went right out the window. But Biden was actually able to leverage that moment into a kind of commitment from Republicans that they weren't actually going to cut those programs. So he says, okay, great, you guys are booing cutting Medicare and Social Security. You don't like cutting Medicare and Social Security? Great, I'll hold you to that. I'm glad we have bipartisan agreement on this issue and everybody stands up.
It was
and
an
claps.
extremely effective setup. We just have to call a spade here. It was very well done by him. Yeah, I don't think it's not Sarah Huckabee Sanders being out of touch as much as Biden just being in touch. He's in touch, so she has nothing to, again, you can go after university professors or activists and things, but they're not. It's not Joe Biden.
And that has always been.
And he didn't get much fodder there.
That has always been the case. Every claim and concern about wokeness has been a Republican politician picking on what a company does, like Disney, picking on what a individual does, or schools. These are not elected politicians. These are choices that parents are making, where they're trying to criminalize parents who give gender-affirming care to their kids. They're trying to criminalize people wearing drag. They're trying to criminalize people who get abortion in this proposed ban, national federal abortion ban. And on the other side, on one side you have a bunch of you have laws that are being promulgated by Republicans to restrict
I don't fully agree with that because...
And on the other half, you have Democrats who won the culture war. Like per the Joy and Reid clip that we played yesterday, yes, there are culture war victories, but you can't use laws to oppose them, or else you look like the authoritarian one in the situation.
I agree with that. There are elements of this that are affected by federal guidance, federal law. That was a big thing during the Obama years. But the other thing I wanted to say is that he's not. He's not right. He's not running on those issues. I think the main area where he said something that opened himself up to charges of hypocrisy was when he slammed Big Pharma. So I wonder so conservatives made a lot about that. There's a lot of talk about, well, if you're so against Big Pharma, so against enriching Big Pharma, why have all these federal policies aligned with what's in the best interest of Pfizer, et cetera, et cetera. I think they were on more solid ground because obviously there has been a lot of law and policy coming out of the federal government that affects that sector and that is to the benefit of major pharmaceutical companies and is skeptical on civil liberties grounds.
Biden took more money from that industry, from the healthcare industry and the insurance industry than anybody else in the race, and there's a reason why he's in office as a consequence. But again, the Republican attack falls a little short when Biden is in this moment saying, we want to cap the price of insulin, we want to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Those are policies that are too incremental and small for my taste, given the scale of our healthcare crisis. But if Republicans want their attacks to land on Biden's hypocrisy, they have to start offering their own affirmative programs as well.
Man, are we going to actually have legislation come out? It sounds like there's agreement between Joe Biden tricked Republicans into agreeing with him or something,
don't
or said
get
things
too
they already
excited.
thought. I don't know what's going on here.
I'll throw some cold water on this in my radar coming up next.